Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 5 of our criminal justice series. It is my pleasure to have attorney Vera Zambrano back with us today. And for those of you who missed our previous podcast episode, attorney Vera Zambrano is an international attorney practicing law primarily between the US and Europe in different legal international matters. She's also a member of the German Bar Association and the German American Lawyers Association, and she is a member of the International Association, as well as a member of the South Florida Professionals Association. And that's just to name a few. Vera, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks, Ramon, for the introduction. I'm doing great. How are you?
Great, great. Doing wonderful. As you can see, I got a different background, so we moved offices. So yeah, just getting situated in this new office. So
It's a great background, very inspiring too.
thank you. Yeah, in fact, right before the podcast, we were talking about, how inspirational Abraham Lincoln is and Michael Jordan, and that's another thing that we both share in common. So we'll have to record a podcast on just them two, right? Because there's so much to talk about as far as who they are and what they stood for.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, cool. So I'll give everybody just kind of a quick introduction of what we're going to be discussing today. So in today's podcast, we're discussing the impact of political climates on criminal justice policies, right? And specifically is how shifts in political power, such as changes in government leadership, influence criminal justice policies, particularly regarding sentencing laws and incarceration rates in the US. And then we're going to be juxtaposing that against what happens in Europe and your experience with what you've seen there as well. So just to kind of jump into the conversation, Vera, do you believe? Let's start off with that. Do you believe politics should play a role in criminal justice policies, including sentencing laws?
So what I believe is the politics will always have a very big impact, right, in the criminal justice system. If you do like that or not, it is what it is, right? So when we look at the general topic of political influence, like in general in the United States, we have to first see and understand that politics often involves the conflict and debate about policy. And criminal justice is one part of this arena, right? So the American political system and the criminal justice system in specific, they involve actions of very many different groups. Of course, the president, right, as the highest office, Congress, courts, bureaucracies, interest groups, elections, and also the media, the public media, right? So these groups also exist in the states and very important local levels. For example, mayor, right, of cities. So, of course, the politics play a major role in the criminal justice system. And we see that in the United States, but also abroad, right, in Europe and in different countries. So it's very important to note that we have elected officials, such as the president, who we're going to see in about 11 weeks, right? The new elections. And we have members of the Congress who get elected as officials that have a direct impact on the criminal justice system. For example, they can decide how much money actually they are going to spend for the criminal justice system and prison reforms. And which laws should be passed, right? Very important. So whenever you look at, political leaders, they are actually the ones that can, get reforms moving or stop certain reforms of the previous, the previous elected official, right?
Right. And then if we can get maybe a little more specific, how do you believe changes in government leadership, such as the transition between conservative and liberal administrations, directly influence sentencing laws and incarceration policies in the US? And maybe because you're practicing attorney there in Miami, maybe you could talk about what you see there in Miami, and I can jump in and tell you a little bit about what I see here in Utah, and then we'll jump to and compare that to maybe what your experience has been in Europe, right?
Yeah, so when we look at, the local levels, so very important, like I said, the mayor, right, or the governor for a state, it's actually very important when they get elected, they have certain agendas, right? They're going to pass through. They have, of course, they have to follow the law, and but they can change and pass laws, right? So when we look at, is it a liberal government, or is it a conservative Republican government? We have to look at all the different states, like federal, state level, and locals. So I believe that it can make a big difference. Not all people will be affected by those, right? If you have criminal justice system, all those people who get arrested or are currently in prison might be affected from that, right? When we look at, there are certain governments that when they get elected as official, they release certain prisoners that have minor or, like especially small felonies, right? They release them more often. Or we have the opposite, that actually a more conservative government may, prosecute for minor felonies, and they have, longer sentences, minimum sentences, or different treatments, right, for prisoners also. So you cannot think about the criminal justice system without the current leaders in politics, right? Maybe in the local level, in the state, or at the federal level.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I don't know if Florida has what type of sentencing structure they have, but so here in Utah, what we have is an indeterminate sentencing structure, right? So what that means is, right, people have no idea how much time they're going to serve when they're sentenced, right? When they're convicted, right? So they could end up with a 0 to 5, for example, right, for a third-degree felony, or 1 to 15 for second-degree felony. And then the first-degree felonies will range anywhere from 3 to life, 5 to life, 6 to life, 15 to life, 25 to life, right? Who actually decides how much time they spend is actually the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. And although Utah has these things called, sentencing guidelines, right? They're meaningless. They're like complete garbage. They're worthless, right? Because the board does not have to follow them. They don't have to acknowledge them. They go against the sentencing guidelines on a regular basis. So really, like, what's interesting is, I'm curious to know from you, like, so in a state like this, and there's a few states, right, that have indeterminate sentencing, it's not right. It's not statutory how much time somebody does.
Yes.
There's no specific rules, and these guidelines mean next to nothing. So it's really up to the 5 individuals, right, that have so much power. It's totally discretionary, completely up to them, what they feel, right, what they're feeling that day or that year, that week, that month, what they feel they should give somebody. So I'm curious to know, how do you think politics affects that there? Because I'm sure there's an impact, but what are your thoughts on that?
So as I said, you have to always look at, it's not only the federal level, right? I mean, the elections are coming up. It's not even like less than 3 months now, right? Beginning of November. So that's going to change a lot, right, when it comes to laws, because they have very different criminal justice reforms. And they also announced different passing of laws, right, already. So they're going to be like, there could not be a bigger difference when it comes to those political parties right now. But that is, affecting on the federal level, right? When we look at state level, we have to see which governor is actually currently running, right? And where are the elections? When are the elections in the states itself? Because those are impacting, reforms of prisons, right? Also any kind of programs for prisons, right? The release programs, then they have all kind of, anti-violence programs. So you have to really look at all the levels to see changes. And as I said, some people might not even notice a bigger change, right? So when we have now a change for the next elections, probably, right? Not everyone will actually feel those consequences, right? Because they might affect a certain group or certain groups of people, and not the public in general. So not every law is affecting every citizen in the country. So you just have to, it is possible that it might be a change for the good or for the bad, right? So whatever you believe in personally might also affect how you see those changes, right? If some people, as we also talked about, those reforms that were like defunding the police, or the opposite, actually, right? To have more security and more public safety, increasing and funding training for police officers, right? How to react appropriately, and gun safety also for them, right? Because there's just so much more to these topics. So we cannot only say, with one slogan that's going to be, the solution and it's going to make everything better, because we have to look at, is it really good to defund the police? Is it bad to defund the police? What does it mean for the community in general, right? So, for example, I was reading an article yesterday that it said defunding the police is actually, it has a lot of benefits, what people don't believe, because that means that a lot of minor felonies or felonies that are, not damaging or not affecting victims, right? They're not prosecuted anymore, right? Because they don't have the financial means to go after every single felony, after every single person. So that is a good thing, right? Because what we want to do, we want to, have those minor felonies, not really, not everyone should go to prison for everything, right? It's like, I think everyone can agree on that there are no resources for that. And, to lock up even more people, as we talked about it, right? Incarceration rates, that only increases also the recidivism rate, right? So even more of those people will end up in jail or in prison again, right? Because they were sentenced pretty harsh, right? Or the sentences were longer than expected, right? For those little felonies. So it's, that leads also to the cycle that we would like to stop, or we'd like to reduce, right? To have, a decrease of incarceration rate, right? As we see in other countries, right? Because it's working. And to put, minor felonies not even under certain sentences, right? To say, okay, they should not be a part of that, right? So we have to strengthen more the rehabilitation approach, right? And also say, how can we prevent those minor felonies, right? And maybe have a training for the people, because a lot of actually, and that was also in one of the articles that I was reading, a lot of these minor felonies are not a criminal problem, they are a health problem. And I thought that is super interesting, right? Because you see all the drug offenses, are they really criminal problems of the society, or are they more a health connected problem, right? Of a lot of people that is, they fall back into the cycle because they grew up there, right? Or they're surrounded by this problem, but it's not actually, they're not, committing more offenses based on drug abuse. Yeah. So we also have or alcoholism, right? This is more a health problem than actually a criminal problem itself. So to go, to go a little bit away from that everything should be prosecuted, because that just fills up prisons even more, right? And gets us into that toxic cycle that we see, overpopulated prisons, actually, right?
Right.
And that cannot be the solution, right? Because we want safer communities. That doesn't mean you should lock up more people. That's not what you should do. Yes.
And we've talked about this before in previous episodes, right? Where I think in Europe, I mean, the philosophy is a little bit different, right? They don't, and I mean, and I'd love to get your opinion on how politics affects sentencing guidelines there. But I know that in general, we talked about how in Europe and in Germany specifically, and we talked about, Finland and Norway and, the Norwegian countries, how there they believe in shorter sentences, significantly shorter sentences. And a lot of these countries, right, especially, the Norwegian countries, right, they actually, they're safer. They have lower crime rates. They have better results. But can you juxtapose that, or can you connect that, or speak to that in connection with how political leadership affects these policies?
Yes. So when we look at European countries, especially like if it's Germany, France, it's Norwegian, like Scandinavian countries, right? Finland is, especially Norway, Finland, and Denmark, right? They have a very, very good statistic when it comes to the criminal justice reform. And why is that? Like, it's not out of, coincidence. It's not that just, happen to be one of the safest, or like when you look at criminal justice, right? One of the safest countries when it comes to crimes. It's not that they lock up more people. The opposite is the case, right? They focus more, what we also talked about the rehabilitation process, right? They don't lock up people to punish them, right? Or for deterrence and to state, signal against them or future crimes. They say, okay, you did something wrong, but that is not the end of the tunnel, right? We have to, give you a second chance. We build a bridge for you, right? You are allowed, or you can, recover from that. So
Right.
what they do, they give for almost the same similar crimes than you can see in the States, much milder sentences, shorter and milder, right? And that means that and also better prison circumstances, right? So that means they have still connection to the families, they have visits from their partners, the families, the kids, and they are released sooner, and most likely also connected to programs, to trainings right afterwards. So they get a better treatment overall. And the prisons are much smaller in Europe than in the States, which is also a big factor, right, for safety of the prisoners, right? So I believe that there's a lot of little aspects that make it better, right? When we look at those two different approaches, the U.S. is still very much focused on the punishment approach. A lot of states are, more modern than others, right? And already go, like California, for example, they try a lot, right, to go into those, different directions, also with programs and trainings and rehabilitation. But it's not like mandatory yet. So I wish there was more like a overall reform, right? That prisons should participate in those programs, right? And get someone to to be a valuable citizen and a member of society again, right?
Right. Do you know, you mentioned, you brought something up. You said, among our 50 states, right? Every state's, a little bit different, and some of them are drastically different than others. Do you know if they've done studies across the board where they're comparing states to look at two different things? One is maybe sentencing, sentences, right, in general, for specific crimes across 50 states to see which states are a little more punitive, or, or which states are a little more relaxed on, how much time that they give, right? More maybe focused on rehabilitation.
Yes.
Curious to, and then also the results of that. I'm curious to know if the states, right? Because I think so if our listeners, would probably assume, and I think I would have assumed that the states that are the harshest on crimes, right? That they punish, with a heavy hand. You would think those are the safest states. But do you know if studies have been done to try to determine whether that or not there's a correlation there?
So I haven't seen a specific statistic that creates and connects those dots, but I have seen statistics that the longer sentences are, in place, the harsher a state is punishing for the same crime, compared to another state, makes it actually not safer, right? The state is not safer by, harsher politics. So what we would think, like, or which is, someone who is not has not experience in that field at all, they would probably think the harsher you punish, the earlier you lock up someone, right? The safer the community gets. This is a false premises, right? So it's actually the opposite, because when we look at it, when you punish a person and this person gets arrested and even incarcerated, right? And the sentence is longer, that means for this individual, it's harder to integrate into society. And that means also, like, logically, that this person has lower chances or almost no chances to recover, right, when they get released. And that means the committing of a new crime, recidivism, right, is spiking through the roof, right? So that's actually, you create the opposite effect that you want to, right, by making it harder and, like, just harsher for people in general. So there have to be a balance, right? We can also not say we just let everything go and we only punish certain crimes. You can also not do that, right? Because the government has responsibility in, in taking action and, also protecting its
Mhm.
individuals, right? You cannot say, well, but you have to really see if you're elected as a political leader, you have to see where's the line, where's the fine line. Do you really want to punish and prosecute someone who has a speeding ticket, right? Some countries are more harsher on that, and even if you don't pay a speeding ticket, you can end up in jail in some states. And
Mhm.
I'm asking myself, is that what the society wants? Do you want to send someone to prison for, violating a speeding ticket? Or is there, does it not make sense, right? Because you fill up prisons and you need a lot of resources, as we talked about. It's extremely expensive, right? Compared to programs that are rehabilitation focused. It's way more expensive to keep someone in prison. What a
Right.
lot of people don't know either, right? They think programs for, like anti-aggression or anti-drug abuse are more expensive, but it's the opposite case. So
Yeah.
you have to really look at it. What result do you want to drive, and what country could you use, right, as an example, as a role model? And of course, the United States is very different. It's unique, right? It's a unique country and has an amazing history, right? And you have to see it. How can you allocate elements, right, in the society where you're living? Because you cannot just say, okay, that's an amazing role model, we put it here, and it will not work one-on-one, right? But you may be able to have some amazing benefits when you look at, like, especially Norway or Denmark, right? They
Mhm.
are very, very good in those, and they had also the same circumstances in the 70s, 80s, 70s, and 90s. So it's not that they were always just a safer country or have lower immigration. That's not the case. They have a high immigration rate also. So they just did a lot of work for 2, 3 decades, right? And now you see actually the fruits that are coming, right, from all those reforms.
That's interesting. What are your thoughts on, because you mentioned California, right? And one of the things that I grew up in Southern California, right? But now that I'm living here, in Utah, you hear, I mean, just about how the state of California is really is in bad shape, right? There's all sorts of problems that they have, and San Francisco is probably one of the cities that comes up the most often, right? Because
Yeah.
they, right, speaking of crimes and punishments, I think they implemented some sort of crime where they will not prosecute anything where if somebody steals under, something that's under $1,000 or
Mhm.
$900. Um, and of course, that's led to some serious problems, right? A lot of major companies have decided to leave and they're not going to reopen. But can you speak to that a little bit? Because it seems to me like there's a fine line, right? There's always this balance of looking for positive ways, right? Reform and all that. But then if you take it a little too far, then you
Yes.
get these crazy examples like what
Yes.
happened in San Francisco.
Yes, the problem is that you see when, a state is, for example, run by a liberal government, right? Where's the line that it's, the politics may be too liberal, right? Because as we see, a society is not based on, people who make a lot of independent, rational, and smart decisions, right? The big majority of people, you have to, be able to address everyone, right? And you need a set of rules. It's just how it is. You need a set of rules that, the community can live with, right? That it's not too strict and it's also not too mild. Now, when we see, like California, a lot of cities there, why is it so violent, right? Because I believe that, a lot of leaders might not have taken the appropriate action, right? To say, they let that a lot of things go loose. So that might be also a problem, right? If you say shoplifting, right? I don't know how the laws are there currently, right? If it's too liberal, if it's too loose. But when you say nothing gets prosecuted under $1,000, then you can expect a higher increase, right, of those small felonies, right? And then you have also the problems with a lot of people like street violence, right? So how do we really limit those problems, make it safer, but also do not overbend, right, the authority of the government, because I believe lower government control is actually better for the community, right? It's actually better for people in general, and not to have, a government rule every little part of the citizen's life. So it is a fine line. And that's why I believe you need to look into statistics, right? You need to look into how was it 20 years ago, 30 years ago? What do you expect, right, in the next 20, 30 years? And how can you really adapt those changes?
Right. And in your opinion, what do you see happening? We have elections coming up. What are your thoughts on what you see happening with as far as criminal justice reform and that type of thing, given kind of where we're at and what's coming in the next few months?
So I believe one way or the other, right? Because no one knows what happens, right, in a couple of weeks. It's only 11 weeks, so it's flying by. People have to make up their mind. They have to go vote, right? They have to educate themselves, because the worst thing you can do is not voting, actually, right? You have to, listen to neutral sources, right? Get a lot of, information from different channels. And then you have to really be smart, go out there and vote, right? And like, no one knows what happens, but I believe one way or the other, they are extremely different at this point, right? Both parties are extremely far apart in what they want and how they want to lead the country the next 4 years. And also, not even only in the country, foreign policies are going to be extremely different under both under both leaders, right? So they also announced, for example, how the relationship with Europe or with other countries may look like, right? So it's going to impact the whole world, right? What the next elected leader will be.
Right.
So I believe that it's it's a very subjective question, and everyone has a different opinion about that. But I believe that it will make a big impact, right, on the criminal justice system in the U.S. Who is going to be elected, because it's 4 years, right? At least 4 years, and then we will have to see, because and the good thing is it's a democracy, right? So whatever happens, it's the decision, right, of the people. And we have to accept it, right? Either way. So the thing is, people can only go out and vote, right, and educate themselves before they do, right, and not just be blinded by characters, right, or by certain speeches, because it's only like a little snippet out of context. But you have to look into those people. What are they standing for, right? And both characters have a history of what they were saying, what they were, asked in interviews, what they believe. Especially also when you look at the Democratic Party, you can look up everything, right? The relationship between those characters and criminal justice system, and what they actually want, right? It's not a secret. So I believe we will see a major difference, especially for the criminal justice system.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Vera, we could probably keep talking about this for another 3 hours, but thank you for your thought-provoking comments. As always, it's been a pleasure. We'll have to continue this conversation another time, but and continue to dive deeper into some of these topics, right? Because there's so much to talk about. But again, thank you, Vera. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how can they reach out to you?
Yes. So my company is, you can find it all over the internet. You just have to type in law firm Vera, Zambrano and Associates. You can always send us an email, right, or contact us through the website. It's lawyer-berlin-miami.com. Our offices are available 24/7, right? So you can reach out at any time, any different time zone you're in, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vera. Look forward to seeing you at the next episode.
Thank you, Ramon. Bye-bye.